And I decided to pick this day of all days when Mercury is in the light of the sun, applying to conjunct the sun, or the sun is already moving away from it. And it's moon day, sun hour where I'm at. And Mercury is in Scorpio. So I decided to do a Mercury in Scorpio. And that's just me experimenting. This is the time where I began this recording, um, right before the tomorrow's eclipse, lunar eclipse. And I'm going to publish it on a Mercury day. So let's see what happens. Um, Mercury in Scorpio. I'm going to try to do natal in transit. So, Mercury is thought processes, communication, trade, agreements. It is flippable. It's adaptive. It doesn't have. It's adaptive in its gender association, and thus can sometimes be attributed to gender non-conforming or be associated with gender non-conforming experiences. Um, Mercury rules Virgo and Libra. Um, I believe it's triplicity ruler of air signs. So it's about small things, it's about discernment. Again, it's adaptable. Um, for its trade, it's more about trickery rather than balancing per se, but it is the trickery part of balancing or skill. Okay, trickery versus skill, not versus, they often go together. Tricks and therefore also technology. Um, Mercury is also associated with media, framing things. Okay, so how we frame things, how we communicate something, um, and also with language and language acquisition. Um, Anymore. So therefore, technology, but technology that is more, it is more your cell phone than a rocket to space. Um, it is more flying private cars than commercial um, airplanes. So it's the lower octave of Uranus for those who work with the outer planets. Um, yeah, that's, I think, is sufficient. First of all, it's moving quite fast around the zodiac, not as fast as the moon, but it is moving quite fast around the zodiac. This is a planet that can retrograde, so unlike the moon, we also have Mercury seem to be going reverse, so it seems to be going backwards from the basically its position um, in the sky relative to the Earth, or how we see Mercury. It can go like other planets, invisible and visible. Um, and right now it's invisible, so it's interesting to record this video and Mercury is invisible. Um, and then retrogrades are more internal energy. This is the time to reflect upon things and so on and so forth. So Mercury is the one of the planets that can also be direct, stationing, or retrograde in a person's chart, and it does make a difference. The motion, whether it's direct, retrograde, or stationing, does make a difference to how you're going to experience Mercury's energy in your own chart. So that's important to pay attention to. right from the get go when we begin to talk about planets that are not sun or moon, um, and also notably relative to planets like Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and so on. Scorpio. Scorpio, fixed water sign, ruled by Mars, ruling our excretion system, but also our sexual organs. Um, Related as well to our blood and to iron, the metal iron. Needless to say, Mercury as well. Mercury, right? And what do we know about Mercury? That that it Mercury can be toxic to our body, whereas iron is mostly if we're not, usually people suffer from not having enough iron than having too much. Although I have seen the opposite as well. Scorpio rules that which is deep psychology, um, and therefore in a way occult because the hidden from the eye aspect. Um, it it rules our animalistic instinct of survival. Think about the animal Scorpio, okay? While Mercury ruling two human signs, um, Scorpio is ruling an animal that you don't want to mess with. So think about, the animal Scorpio. If you see a Scorpio in the house, how many of you are raising Scorpios? So, write in the comments below. What is your pet? Write in the comments below. Um, because they're very likely to be lethal. Not all of them, but they're very likely to be lethal. And if they attack, it is to kill. And also the how they kill is from the inside. Okay, they inject something into the opponent, and so the opponent dies from the poison. And therefore, with Scorpio, there's a saying that goes, "The poison is the medicine." Okay, this already relates to medicine, to shamanism, to the type of medicine that requires purging, an excretion of something. So it can be emotional, psychological, also blood, and so on and so forth. And the Scorpio, the Scorpio is very much around the edges of something, touching the edge of an experience. So, edge is an important thing. To be honest, I'm trying to infer that from the animal itself. Perhaps it is more the human experience with Scorpio because I don't necessarily think that this is the scorpionic experience for like the Scorpio itself, but the human experience with the archetype of a Scorpio is like you meet this thing, you meet the edge of your life. Okay, you get stung by this thing, you're very likely to die. So, the human experience with Scorpio, or what we project onto Scorpio, is like meeting the edge of life. And so, when the human being is born with placements in Scorpio, they can have this meeting the edges of life experiences that I attribute to not the Scorpio as an animal, but the human experience of encountering the archetype of the Scorpio, if that makes sense. Um, and so the Scorpio is external to us even when we have those elements of scorpionic um, planets um, in our chart. However, it is interesting because if that encounter between being born or having planets in a certain sign and the behaviors that you project as a human when you encounter the elements of the sign kind of pops the question, is the scorpionic inside you? Like, are you the scorpion, or are you a human that is drawn to that scorpion that is ever so external to you, and your experience is, I'm meeting the edges of life, while the Scorpio experience can simply be, I'm living and protecting myself as any, living creature. But definitely the human experience is about, meeting the edges of life. You don't necessarily meet the edge of life with a Taurus. That's the polar opposite. Unless you put, like a red cloth, or you need to arouse the Taurus to attack you. Basically, they're not gonna just do it. They're like, they don't care. However, our encounters with Scorpios are like, yes, the Scorpio is usually more scared than you are, but that does not that only means that they will try to put an end to you so that you won't bother them anymore. While the bull is undisturbed, unless it's like there is no reason that, and you usually won't meet it at your backyard. And this is another Scorpio thing. Scorpio is not necessarily the edges of the world, but it's the edges of the world in your backyard. How do we encounter Scorpios? Yes, we can go around in the field and look for, or have these experiences, but, a Scorpio is an animal that you can meet at your home, in the changing of the seasons, just like a snake, right? So it's not necessarily the scary thing out there, but the scary thing up down here, that is afraid of you and you're afraid of it, but you're sharing a house right now until you call someone to safely evacuate the Scorpio from your house. And that's, and that can already begin to describe to us, um, the many facets of the Scorpio. Okay, you're not very likely to run into a scary situation with a lion. You're not very likely to ram into a ram. Definitely, you're not scared of the fishes, um, and maybe the sharks, but the crab is more weird and funny. I mean, of course, it's lethal. It's like it's lethal. I don't know if it's lethal, but it's like it's not pleasant, but it feels lethal, but it's not necessarily lethal. Um, and then those are not the things. A Scorpio can kill you. Um, so this is where we meet survival instincts, fears and paranoias. What is a threat? We have to differentiate what is a life-threatening situation and what is not. Now put Mercury in Scorpio. Now, it is a good question. If I asked you, what are the circumstances in which a person thinks clearly, communicates clearly, expresses themselves clearly? How to argue constructively while remaining civil. It usually takes self-nourishment, space, um, which is another thing you don't have with Scorpio, is that narrow, deep kind of spaces that are hidden. So it takes being calm. It takes um, de-stressing. It takes taking the time. It takes considering the options. It takes being curious about the issue at hand rather than fearful. Okay, if I want to have a good constructive conversation with you, and you just happen to think, the opposite of what I think, then I'd rather tackle you with curiosity. What made you think that? That's so strange. That's so interesting. Um, and then think, of all the things that I said about Scorpio. It's constricted, it's narrow, it's deeply emotional, it's occultish, it's protective, it can be borderline paranoid, but it can also be acute and sensitive to threat. Um, and in general, it's survivalistic. So having the passage of Mercury in Scorpio, uh, um, or having natal, Scorpio Mercury, yes, you definitely go deep, but you don't always see, you know, you don't always see the light from down there. So, um, you're definitely acutely aware of any survivalistic perspectives any discourse may have. Furthermore, the very thought process within you is fixed, emotional, yes, absolutely deep, and dark. Okay, the dark is, it's very difficult to be deep and light. Okay, if you dig deeply enough, then it gets darker. And the reasoning you're doing that is for survival as well as the how. So you're asked to operate your entire mind processes under tremendous stress and navigate life and death situations. Even when you're just, arguing with your mama who cooks breakfast tomorrow. So you're very much aware that if you do it this one time, she might expect you to grow up and do it for her for the rest of your life. However, if you're somehow unable to do that and you have good reasoning, then you have life insured yourself from cooking breakfast when you're not feeling like doing that. But then the right thing to do would be, you don't see the option of, I'm going to do it today and then I'm going to do it whenever I feel like doing it or whenever I'm able, it's in my boundaries to do that. And sometimes I'm not going to do that. It's like they're going to expect me to do that from now until forever. This is the black or white thinking. Okay? And that can be something as simple as who's cooking breakfast tomorrow. Um, on the upside, you definitely have astute awareness of when something is life and death issue. You definitely have acute awareness of when somebody is not just forming an opinion, but the implication of following and implementing that opinion as, let's say, a state policy or a policy in the society or in the relationship would mean dead people. And you're acutely aware of that. And so, but you're also acutely aware that just talking about it is not going to help. Just raising your voice is not going to help. Because if that opinion is already expressed, is already coming up, then you're aware of the billions of things that you sensed with your psyche before it came to form a reasoning thing. So it may be that you felt constricted in the body, and then you felt like something in the throat, and then you felt like, just something off, and then became a bit sick, and then you heard this news on the radio, and you're like, I knew something like that was coming up, and now it's too late. So, or you may think now it's too late, but you definitely are aware of the depth of something until it rises to the surface. So, oh, one charge. Um, so that makes arguing with you very difficult for both sides, because if you're able to see 10 levels of an argument before the words are, formed, then, and the person in front of you can see the argument, how on earth are you going to share information together? Even if you've managed to see that this person is just, naive, seeing things on surface level, and not necessarily bad meaning, so you might be able to sense that. But it's still going to be very difficult for you to convey a message. Therefore, um, there may be a buildup of communication. And there's acute awareness to words and their magical power. It's not like the Virgo acute awareness to the frequency power of words. It's literally awareness of um, the way what happens and how a word impacts reality. So the survivalistic nature of um, constricted conversation. And so it's a Mercury that is Mars ruled. And what's Mars? But what the Scorpio needs to remember is that you cannot penetrate without being penetrated. If you don't speak about yourself, it doesn't mean that you're not visible. You're being, the other person is, you can sense subtle. The raggedy was on. Ah, not happening. I was trying to record a Mercury in Scorpio when Mercury is invisible. And then, of course, naturally, I had, well, let's just refresh this. I don't know if it saved the previous one. We hit, it's a Venus hour. We hit Uranus, and there was a cut in communication. Oh, yeah, we went past Uranus, 18 degree. 18 degree of, yeah, in Venus in the 19th degree. Very interesting. Moon changed the degree in the meantime. Okay, let's just check what's on.